Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our March 29th North Texas Mobility Corporation board meeting. We are going to officially call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. as posted. First item on the agenda is introductions, and we have a really special introduction today by my notes. Our last board meeting was February the 23rd, and then on March 6th, Mr. Bert Deshay officially joined us as the general manager. So welcome, Mr. Deshay.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Would you mind introducing yourself to the group and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly, Bert Deshay.
Put it up higher. Cool. Good morning again. I'm Bert Deshay, 30-year professional in transportation. Started my career with Greyhound in Louisville, Kentucky in April of '93. Worked as in Ohio, Michigan, Las Vegas, California, other stops. Also worked at Southwest Airlines for a while, and also worked for DART for a few years, and also by-state development in St. Louis, Missouri. So I've done terminal management, regional management, scheduling and planning, analytics for St. Louis. Also, I was in charge of the hiring and training as well at that location. So I'm just really excited to be here to continue to build a great dynamic team that's going to deliver safe, efficient service. It's been exciting so far. And I also want to thank Sean, Steve, and Maurice for their assistance during this transition as well. So I'm pretty excited, and I look forward to meeting and working with everybody here in the room.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
We're really glad to have you.
Okay.
Any other introductions for the good of the group? Okay. Next, we'll go to public comments. I'll read this agenda. Item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the board of directors on any agenda item or other matters relating to NTMC. Each speaker is giving a total of 3 minutes to address any item. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, and slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, claps, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not able to connect to the Zoom meeting must email his or her public comment to kmorris-perkins@dcta.net no later than 12 noon on Tuesday, March 28th, 2023, to ensure the comment will be distributed to board members prior to the meeting. The board of directors are not permitted to take any action on any subject raised by a speaker during citizen comments. However, the board of directors may have the item placed on a future agenda for action, refer to the item to the NTMC officers for further study or action, briefly state existing NTMC policy, or provide a brief statement of factual information in response to the inquiry. Do we have any public comments to do? No. We do not. Okay. The first item on the agenda, then, the consent agenda, is consider approval of regular meeting minutes dated February 16th, 2023, and those have been included in the packet. Is that correct? All right, does everybody have a copy of it? Okay. So we can make a motion to approve and accept the minutes as written. Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve and accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. All right. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item on the agenda is informational reports, monthly financial statements for FY22 year to date through December of 2022. And one of the agenda items that we'll have a little bit down the program is our CFO is going to talk about the budget process and all that sort of thing. So if there's any questions about information reports, we can certainly address them at that time, if the board is okay with that. Okay. So the first item on the regular agenda then is considering the election of officers for fiscal year 2023 for the NTMC Corporation. And the reason for this item comes from the bylaws that were approved for NTMC in our last board meeting. Article 3, Chapter 3.01 says officers, titles and term of the office. Officers of the corporation shall be a president, a secretary, a treasurer, and other such officers as the board may from time to time elect or appoint. One person may hold more than one office, except the president shall not hold the office of secretary. The initial term of the officers of the corporation should extend to December 31st, 21, and subsequent terms would be for 3 years commencing on January 1. So what we're proposing here, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, is a 3-year term that is already 6 months or 3 months into the process. Okay,
Still in the unexpired terms.
got it. Yeah, so the rest of this year plus 2 following years, and then we start on January 1. If you recall from the last board meeting, when we talked about the realignment of the NTMC organization and the hiring of the board's own general manager that brought Mr. Deshay, we also talked about further aligning the DCTA and the NTMC organizations such that the president of NTMC would be our the DCTA chief operating officer, Mr. Bell. The chief financial officer would be our DCTA chief financial officer, Ms. Evans Jones, and then the secretary would be our DCTA board secretary, Ms. Keisha Morris Perkins. That would be my recommendation and proposal for this board to undertake, but certainly the opportunities exists to have discussion or other conversation as to other directions that we might be able to go.
I have no objection, but it seems logical that this is what we would do anyway. Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to do this? I don't, it seems to me to be exactly what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly, it helps that, from the president's perspective, Mr. Bell will have responsibility for delivering service on the operation over all of the DCTA modes. And so we want the bus operation to be integrated with the rest of our modes.
But I think that's what makes sense.
Right, and Ms. Evans Jones prepares the budget for DCTA, of which NTMC is a part, so
Right.
it would make sense for her to carry that work, and then Keisha does the board work for the DCTA organization, already understands how these things fit together. Again, the spirit of this recommendation is really trying to integrate the operation while maintaining the integrity of a separate body at NTMC, which is the reason that we hired a specific general manager for that purpose.
Well, if it's okay, I'll make a motion that we do as you suggest.
Okay. Take a motion in a second.
Or just repeat the motion will be about Mr. Bell for president, Jones for treasurer, and Morris Perkins for secretary.
Yeah, Evans Jones.
Evans Jones, sorry. I was saying last night.
Okay, that is the motion.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Item 2 is discuss and consider a general manager's evaluation policy and goals and objectives. So at your place is a draft of a general manager evaluation policy. And if we have extra copies, could Mr. Bell and Mr. Deshay get copies as well? And Ms. Evans Jones, please. And one of the other things that we're endeavoring to do across the DCTA organization, therefore it makes sense to do this across the NTMC organization, is to make sure that every person who comes to work every day at NTMC understands exactly how what they do delivers to the mission of the organization. And so that requires a set of goals and objectives for every employee to be understood all the way through the process, all the way through the organization. And if there's an evaluation process and policy in place to make sure that performance is maintained and accountability is maintained. That starts with the leader of the organization, and in NTMC that starts with the general manager. What's proposed here is required by Mr. Deshay's employment agreement, which this board approved and adopted in the last meeting, that we will provide him a mechanism for setting goals and receiving feedback on those goals so that he understands where he stands with this board at all times, which I think is certainly his desire as he nods his head vigorously to say, yes, this is what we want to be about. So I appreciate that. At the same time, Mr. Bell and I are having these conversations as he's now been on board at DCTA for about 90 days. We're defining what are his goals and objectives, and his goals and objectives are in some part tied to how the NTMC organization functions. So what I'd like to be able to do is just walk through this policy and not read word for word. Oh, you don't have a copy at your place? Okay.
Here, I'll order it.
I'll do that. You're welcome. Thank you. So what I'd like to be able to do is just fly through this and talk about what it does, how the mechanism works, and then We don't have to, we do not have to approve this today. If there's comments or commentary, we can certainly take those back and revise, but for what it's worth, this policy reflects significantly a policy that's in place for the GCTA board on how it rates its CEO. And so again, we're looking for consistency and common approach through the organization. So it states a purpose. The purpose of the policy is to provide a manner by which the board conducts evaluations to support the person's development and effectiveness as an NTMC leader. The goals of the evaluation, it's really about a dialogue between this board and the general manager. This board ought to have a high level of comfort that the general manager and therefore the NTMC organization is performing as intended on behalf of the taxpayers and our stakeholders. So that's first and foremost. We also, though, want to use it as an opportunity to hear how the general manager is experiencing the job, how they feel about their performance, what their concerns are, and how they're being supported. We want to be able to give clear and detailed feedback to the general manager about what they're doing well and areas of improvement. We want to continuously have an opportunity to review the job description and a work plan to begin making the process for the coming year. So we want this conversation to be tied into the fiscal year budgeting process so that if this board says NTMC ought to do this, then the general manager can accommodate that in the goals and objectives that we would propose. And then that can also funnel its way back to the DCTA board. And then we want to be able to document performance as a basis for reference or for disciplinary action. So all of these evaluations would be carried out in executive session on a biannual basis, which means every 6 months. There would be a mid-year review and then an end-of-year review. The mid-year performance review would occur in March. The end-of-the-year performance review would occur in September. That aligns with the fiscal year. Obviously, it's March right now, so we're looking at a 6-month review that'll be at the end of the fiscal year, which would align nicely with going into fiscal 2024. NTMC Human Resources maintains the policy and maintains the records. So the way that this will work, general manager proposes business objectives to evaluate his performance. So Mr. Deshay will come to us and say, here's 5 to 7 business objectives that are SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, reasonable, and timely. And the board gets the opportunity to consider those objectives, to potentially modify those objectives and come to some sort of agreement. The general manager is saying with these goals that these are goals that he is committing to achieve. And it may be that as he goes through, he learns things about trying to accomplish the goals he didn't know at the outset, like, wait, this organization is not set up this way. We don't have these resources. And this provides the mechanism for him to communicate with the NTMC president to say, hey, we need to think about different resources through the budgeting process for the coming year. We would fully expect that sort of dialogue. As the board of directors reviews his performance, we would consider obviously the performance against the goals, but also how he interacts with the board, how he executes, how he thinks strategically and plans, how he conducts administration, financial management, maintenance of the budget, how he engages with the public and with the staff, so on and so forth. And then item G is really important. By necessity, this is a subjective process and requires a high degree of communication. It depends on a relationship that's based on mutual trust and respect. We want to go into this relationship with Mr. Deshay with all things known as much as they can be as to what he's walking into, what the board is thinking and feeling, so that by the end of this first year of his employment, we feel like we've taken a step forward, and every subsequent year, we feel like we're taking steps forward as an organization. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Because the representatives that you have all represent different domains, shall we say?
Right. Right.
And this gives us an opportunity to communicate.
Correct. So that's the philosophy behind it. And then what follows is the process. So, and this procedure is identified in writing, but then it's also defined graphically if you're a visual type of learner on the next page. But I'll run through those. In item 4A, the GM proposes objectives in March. So this is before the fiscal year, or right about the time the budgeting process starts. And then the board of directors issues those objectives in June, saying this is, now the budget workshop is happening. We expect these are your goals and these are your objectives for next year. And then the general manager creates a work plan that says, this is how we're going to execute against these goals over the course of the following year. That's finalized basically by September. And so then at the mid-year review of the fiscal year, that's March of the following year, the general manager would complete a self-evaluation in February and give it to the board of directors. The board of directors, the chair would send this to the board. The board members get to review his self-evaluation, how he feels he's doing about his performance. And then in the February NTMC board meeting, or the March one, if we have flexibility, we would say, let's get into executive session and let's consider what he said about his own performance, and let's think about how we think about his performance. Then that gives the chair the opportunity to provide written feedback to the general manager in advance of the March board meeting. The idea is that we give the general manager that written feedback in advance of the March board meeting so that he's not blindsided in an executive session. He has a chance to review, consider, digest. And then in the March board meeting, you come in with, here's how we're thinking about your performance. Here's how he's thinking about his performance. So we kind of reconcile those opinions. That way, by the time you get to a year-end review, there are no surprises. There should be dialogue all throughout the process, but definitely the mid-year review provides an opportunity to confirm there are no surprises based on where you're going for year-end. Then same process at the year-end review, self-evaluation in August. Everybody looks at it on the board, conversation in August. And then in September, the final rating is provided to the general manager. At that time, the board of directors gets to consider, the general manager gets to request modifications to employment agreement, terms and conditions, all that sort of thing. And then we go into the following year with the work plan and the goals and objectives set that were done in the prior June. And then on the last page, the chart there just shows for the current fiscal year, these are the milestones, and then this is what we're thinking about for the upcoming fiscal year. So in this case, where we are right now, we're in March. And so we're right about the time that the general manager should be proposing goals and objectives to the board. We're not expecting him to do that today, but we do want to spend some time in this meeting talking about what we think those goals and objectives should look like. We should start that conversation now so that by the time we get to this fiscal year end, we can have a work plan and goals and objectives for this year and then rolling into next year. So overall, that's the process that's being proposed. This allows us, again, to comply with the terms of his agreement, and it's also just really good practice on how to run an organization. So any questions about that or discussion?
Well, I think the only one I have is, obviously, this is not going to be a page and a half. It's going to be a relatively complete kind of presentation. I mean, what he suggests are the goals and objectives, right? It would be nice to have it before it's presented or at some time so we can read it. If it is going to be relatively large so that we can ask questions and the answer to those questions would essentially help us understand how he's doing certain things if we don't understand it. He knows this business better than I do, that's for sure. And so basically it'd be nice to be able to read it and then be able to ask some questions. He already knows what he's written. And so therefore he is then prepared to answer the questions that I have. Now, I don't know whether that's consistent the way we've done things in the past or not. But if it doesn't make sense, then, you know, it's not a big deal. But I just thought that way we have a chance of reviewing things before whatever meeting occurs, such that we can ask questions if we don't understand, which I'm sure he would have answers to. And it would essentially make all of us buying into what is being proposed, because we've asked the questions we needed to ask ahead of time, having read it ahead of time, so that we end up with something that we end up all agreement. Does that make sense or not?
It does, and that's in the process. He would send his write-up to me. His self-evaluation would come in to the board chair. It would get distributed to the board before the board meeting. That way, when the board comes together, you've already had a chance to read it.
That's all I'm looking for.
Now, in terms of goal setting, you know, we're going to need to get spun up here a little bit, and so we'll have a conversation first about, does this make sense? And certainly wouldn't ask anybody to approve this today, but if there's comments, questions on the policy, we can work those through the secretary and bring back a final version for next time to be approved. But there's nothing that stops us right now from just having a dialogue about what is important to this board in terms of general manager performance, so that as he's thinking about his goals and objectives and working with Mr. Bell to put together his goals and objectives, they know kind of ahead of time where we are, because we can certainly talk about, we'll talk about this again in the next meeting. We can kind of finalize it and formalize it. So
Because each one of the cities in a way have a different relationship, shall we say, with this organization. And so we have different goals and objectives that we may be looking for. And I don't know how you address that, having to deal with especially three different organizations, but
well, he's dealing with, he reports to this board, so this is one organization, but the board represents
that's what I mean.
four
Yeah.
different organizations, really. So
Right. And each one of us has maybe different goals and objectives we're looking for.
right.
I have a question on
Sure.
it looks like, I may be reading it wrong because this is, fairly quick just to go through. But it looks like under E, there's a lot of great things that we would evaluate and consider in the performance eval.
Mhm.
But then when we look at the procedure, it's almost all based on objectives that, I can't remember your last name,
Shay.
is Shane. Will actually we'll all agree on. And so I wanted to make sure that whenever we're saying like in B, maybe a review, GM completes its self-evaluation of performance against the objectives. I just wonder if we could say including the objectives, so that we could really have a discussion more about board relations and communications and public relations, and a more broad discussion of the performance, including the objectives that we set forth as well.
Okay. Yeah, the way that I think about it is that the objectives are very clear and defined. And these 9 things in paragraph E kind of overlay over top of it. You're looking at that performance through the lens of all these different factors. And so if you wanted to propose an edit that makes that more clear, I'm fine with that.
I would just like to take it in totality, especially look at the objectives and the goals. And once we see that, that may be more clear that there's one related to financial management, there's one related to, board relations, stuff like that. Maybe that's the way you address it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But if not, then I think I would like to be able to say, hey, you were awesome on communication and with the public, and maybe not so great on board, or,
Right.
and I don't want to be limited to just objectives.
Yeah.
That's the intent.
Yeah, and I think that certainly having these objectives defined would help sort of draw that relationship. So. Other thoughts?
If we're expected to review his performance based on staff kind of engagement feedback, how are we soliciting that feedback? Is there a formal process already? Are we, is that just something to discuss with him? How are we going to have that information?
So. Good question. Part of the question here is, how does this board want to govern? There, you will ask likely for things like key performance, and we would ask for things like key performance indicators. We'd ask for things like a report from our president on how things are going. The president who also happens, the NTMC president who also happens to be the chief operating officer at DCTA. And so I think that is the primary, that is the staff presence that you're talking about. And so in our board meetings, generally, we've been having these general manager reports. There could be NTMC president reports. The NTMC president will ultimately be the one responsible for delivering this meeting. And so that's really the way that I see that going. Makes sense?
Yeah. Do y'all do internal survey of your staff? Or has anything done that?
We have started the process, I would say, on the DCTA side, we did an informal survey just about a month ago as we've been through this whole transformation process. And that was a conversation that came up about providing a survey on the NTMC side to just understand tone and temperature of the employees and all that sort of thing.
I think that could get to what we're talking about as well. Maybe I'll try it out on the DCPA side and see how helpful and
Yeah.
how that process works. Maybe something we could.
Yeah.
I'm very supportive of that. I know we do a lot of benchmarking, but benchmarking against other kind of organizations would be really helpful.
Okay. So for purposes of helping, when I think about potential goals being formulated for the general manager, I'm thinking about it through the lens of the conversations that Mr. Bell and I are having about his performance, which is impacted by how the bus operation runs, how the on-demand service runs, how the train runs. So it's things like meeting KPIs for safety, service, and by service mean on-time performance primarily. We have other ideas in goals and objectives applicable to bus operation, like evaluating fare collections and media and opportunities to streamline cash collection, integrate regional fares, that sort of thing. Providing centralized data collection and reporting, improving the robustness of our ability to report data on a timely manner. Evaluating opportunities and making recommendations to reduce cost on Connect and bus-related services, including alternatives to the NTMC organizational structure as it is right now. And then maintaining of standards and protocols with the board for communication and regular reporting. In other words, you all have the understanding you need that he is intended to deliver. Now, the general manager is focused on delivery of the operation day to day, so his engagement in those things can look different than it does for Mr. Bell, who's got a much more strategic sort of perspective. But certainly, I think KPIs would be one that we would agree upon, and then there's other things in here that we could bring back. So if you'd like, we could bring back a recommendation to the next board meeting as to here are 5 to 7 smart business objectives for the general manager, and we can talk about it.
One other question, we all represent different organizations, shall we say, or different communities, whatever you want to call it. And each one of these communities has probably a different outlook on what they want or expect, because they have different ways of operating and they're different sizes. How do we attack that problem with somebody that's responsible for all of them? And basically would have to put together something that satisfies individual as well as whole.
Yeah.
Because Highland Village is totally different from Louisville. And also, other places, but that's what I don't understand. How do you can't have the same goals and objectives for Highland Village that you do for Louisville.
Yeah.
And how do we handle it?
So I think what you're talking about is service delivery. What are the services that are delivered to each member city? Right. And that is a DCTA board responsibility. DCTA board sets the policy on what are the services that are delivered. Mr. Deshaies' responsibility is to deliver on those services and execute the delivery of those services. So from that perspective, the DCTA board, you're right, has to consider the needs of all 3 member cities. Once that program has been defined through the budget process and NTMC gets its money, then it's about how does Mr. Deshaies execute on that plan. And so that's why I said there's going to be a different level of some of these things that I just listed out are very strategic in nature from Mr. Bell's perspective. Mr. Deshaies is going to be more tactical, but he's still got a part to play in trying to help figure out how we make this organization more efficient, how we make cash and fare collection more efficient, all those sorts of things. So we cannot, in my opinion, set goals for Mr. Deshaies like drive ridership on Highland Village paratransit services. That's not his. He has to deliver those paratransit services, and we want to talk about KPI for Highland for paratransit services. Then we set that bar, and he's responsible to deliver. but he's not driving changes in service or change in delivery. That is the responsibility of the DCTA.
Okay. Each one of our cities are different. So therefore, each one of the cities ought to have different goals and objectives to a certain extent. Or am I misunderstanding what you just said?
I think you're right. Those goals and objectives, however, are catering services to cities is what the DCTA board does when it says we're going to provide this much fixed route, we're going to provide this much on demand, we're going to provide this much train service. And then Mr. DeShay is responsible for delivering the fixed route and air transit portion of that service portfolio.
Think of NTMC more as the contractor of DCTA providing the services for DCTA. And then this board oversees NTMC as the contractor.
And how do we communicate to the city councils, for example? You need to have something from them. And I would guess that's where you get it, is through them or through us, about what is it you really want? What is it you really want and what can we deliver of what it is you're asking for? And you know, we've had discussions about that.
Right.
Because the needs of Highland Village are totally different. But to a great extent from the other organizations. So therefore, it's going to make it difficult for him unless we compartmentalize it so that somebody like me that lives in Highland Village and sees what goes on there I just think there's different input from the different cities. I guess I would put it that way.
And that input comes from the member cities board representative at DCTA. So in Highland Village's case, Secretary Costa comes to the DCTA board, but this is what Highland Village needs from DCTA.
Or
That's where it's
citizen
gonna go.
has a concern, that citizen takes that concern more to DCTA.
Correct. But then we would look to our general manager to resolve that recurring issue or recurring problem. You know, customer service is probably one of the things that you probably should have a goal that focuses on ensuring a high level of customer service or something to that effect. For Highland Village specifically, NTMC is delivering air transit service and ADA services. If you're talking about what else does Highland Village need, that would come through Secretary Costa on the DCTA board to get reflected in the DCTA budget.
Okay, and since we both represent the same city, that would suggest that we have to communicate with each other.
Yes.
Right now, there's no communication. And it's nobody's fault, but there's no communication between her organization and our organization.
Okay.
And if we're gonna do, as you suggest, which I think makes all the sense in the world, I would think we'd have to set up some communication necessity between the two organizations so that we understand what it is collectively that each city really wants to do.
And
Does that make sense, or?
I understand what you're saying. I think that part of the reason for aligning the board officer or the corporation officers with DCTA staff is to help in that integration. And then whatever the form or format of communication between you as the NTMC representative and Secretary Costa / Paul Stevens as the DCTA representative for Highland Village. That's something that we could certainly take up offline.
Yeah, it would be nice to know how we can communicate.
Okay.
I want to make sure that I'm not trying to do something that the other organization doesn't want to do, so on and so forth. I'd rather be able to support whatever it is, but collectively, but we don't have any integration between the organizations, at least for Highland Village, if they do for other.
Okay. So that's one communication at a time sort of channel to build. And I think about it, what we're doing here at the NTMC board is ensuring the quality and value of the service that the DCTA board says the bus operation is supposed to deliver. And so the things that you're talking about is what does the bus operation, what should the bus operation be delivering? That's another level of conversation that doesn't happen in this forum, but certainly can.
Yeah, that's what I would appreciate it, because Diana and I do talk to each other every once in a while. But she is dealing with different issues than we are. And, or we collectively deal with everything, and she is concentrated on that. If there was some relationship, some communication relationship between the two organizations, then basically I can understand exactly what Highland Village really wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had this discussion a little bit before, that Highland Village is a little different than the other two cities, and so our needs and wants may be different. And then, but all of us need to agree, is that really something we want to do as an organization? To deal with different ways of dealing with different things.
Well, I can take an action with you separately to set up. Okay. Other questions or discussion? I mean, maybe what we do is, if members of the board have other comments or questions, we could Keisha could send this out in Word form. You could do a track changes thing, send it back to Keisha to collect. I can take a look at it, and then we bring it back to the board in the next meeting to resolve those comments, adopt policy, and then in the meantime, I will work with Mr. Bell and Mr. Deshay on a proposed set of goals and objectives for the general manager, and we can accept those in the next meeting as well. That work?
Just send them directly to Keisha, don't include all,
Correct. Yeah, just send them.
throw that reminder in there.
Yeah.
It never hurts.
Yep. Okay. All right, so any other discussion or questions on that? Mr. Deshay, is there something you'd like to add into the conversation here, or Mr. Bell?
I know that. Well, I know we have multiple cities. I would like to thank you for incorporating the Texas Father City. You the most I've had this operation. Past experience where you have different needs and wants. Let's know what those are.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I'm talking about too.
Take a punch out.
Yeah, it would.
All right. Okay, well, we'll leave that there. If you could send your comments to Keisha maybe by the 1 week from today, do we say that? And then we can go from there. Okay, next item is a presentation of the general manager's monthly report. That'll be you.
That would be me.
All right, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the organizational chart, if you would look at that in your package here. We have still several positions that are open for bus operators. One position for mechanic 2, this is up in the upper left-hand corner. Mechanic 3, we have one position, parts coordinator, one position open. And the last 3 are on hold. We do have 2 new hires, a service attendant, and this is as of 2/13, service attendant and bus operator.
Are those shown on here? The new service attendant is on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask why the 3 positions are on hold?
If we can, I'll wait until we get to the driver's recruitment status, and Cameron will be able to explain that a little bit more in detail. No questions about that. Since we discussed the organizational chart, I'd like to move on to the driver recruitment status, and Cameron will be discussing that.
Good morning. How are y'all?
Doing great.
So in February, we've had 10 CDL operator positions open. We had one parts coordinator who recently in March has transitioned into a asset management coordinator position. So the position was reevaluated and reconfigured to better fit the company needs. We still have a mechanic 2 and 3 that we're looking for. The payroll and benefits coordinator position is on hold just due to reviewing the position and seeing if there is an additional need to fill the position at the moment. We hired a service attendant on 2/13. They started along with the bus operator. The dispatcher positions that are on hold, there, again, we are looking at possibility of doing some reevaluation of those positions and restructuring possibly, what that position entails. So those are the reasons why some of those are on hold. Does that make sense? Answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So overall, we've hired two, we filled 2 positions in February. We extended 3 offers, but unfortunately, 1 was not accepted. We are continuing to look for additional ways that we can recruit bus operators and mechanics. I went over to NCTC yesterday, and we are looking very hopeful to start a partnership with them for the automotive program to see newly graduated students and or close to graduation to see possibly if they would be interested in coming our way to work with us. We are also looking at different type of recruitment strategies to better attract candidates for our bus operations.
Questions?
I think, Cameron, it's important to note here that the collective bargaining agreement with our drivers is up for renewal in March of next year. And so NTMC will be starting the process of those conversations, which will potentially drive changes in the way that those positions are budgeted through the budget process. So stay tuned there. And then another thing that I've asked Mr. Bell to look into is the challenges that we're having in recruiting mechanics. Of all the things that are on that list, the mechanics are something that is an urgent need. And so asking them to look at what is the problem with that recruitment and how do we make it better? So more to follow there. Also, just as information, we'll likely be having some conversation in our April DCTA board meeting about recommendations for organization change on both the DCTA and the NTMC side, which will take us one step closer to optimizing where we need to be. And we'll bring that back to this board for advisement after the April DCTA board meeting.
Let me ask just a crazy simple question, okay? Is part of the issue associated with hiring the fact that these people that we're trying to hire are in short supply, or is it have something to do with the fact that they can make more money for somebody else and that's what's driving them away? I don't know whether we have an answer to that, but if you got a feel for what is causing us not to be able to fill some of these positions.
Yes, Cameron keeps track of that, and she will be able to explain.
So regarding our mechanics, a lot of the mechanics do work flat rate, and our pay does not equal $30 an hour for some of them. During flat rate, you can make up to $300-400 a day. Just depends on where you're working. A lot of the reasons why we are not receiving candidates, I'm going to say, is because of the pay. I've talked to several candidates. I've sourced several candidates. As you can see, I have reached out and sourced 26 mechanic 2s, 19 mechanic 3s, who would fit the level of what we need. And a lot of them are saying it's the pay, it's the location. There's not an interest there. Unfortunately, there's not. It's not the benefits. The benefits are great. we stress our benefits, we break it down by an hourly wage to them. We promote our benefits as much as possible. And although they agree that we have great benefits, it's really what you can take home and what you can afford to do for your family.
And the, and the last mechanic that left for about $4, $3 or $4 more per hour. So they saw a little bit of benefit and a little bit more take home pay. So they departed based on that.
So are we, if you look at everybody, where are we in this, the payroll thing? We may not be the highest, but are we the lowest? Are we in the middle? Is there any way of knowing where we rank as far as these particular people are concerned?
Mr. Bell and Mr. Deshay have started compiling some information, and also Cameron's got some of that information, I think, in the upcoming board meeting. We can have a conversation.
Be able to present on it.
That's great, because that would help us understand why they're coming to a fantastic organization, quite frankly. It's a shame that we don't get some of them because of something we may not have any real control.
It's a very competitive market.
Yeah, I
So
know.
we'll have a conversation.
Yes.
Thank you, Cameron. If no other questions regarding that, we'll move on to ticket sales. For fare box revenue, we had $3,919.65, and that's on page 18. And the other packet. And a point of sale revenue, $3,145.50. And then we move, if no questions regarding that, we'll move on to key performance indicators. Mr. Rayleigh will be speaking to those.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Troy Rayleigh, Senior Director of Mobility Services, and I'll be presenting the KPIs this morning. As you can see, our passenger count was trending down, but that's not unusual. This is a week before spring break. More people leave earlier. And in the next report, you'll see the dip in spring break, and you'll see the increase going back up as well. So we always see a dip. All these throughout this report, you're going to see how it trends with spring break. The university impacts are everything when they're out on spring break or any type of break. So we saw a natural trend downward on all fronts, including missed trips and for Connect. Obviously, we had less activity going on during spring break. We reduced bus service dramatically. Any questions on the fixed route?
Something weird happening January 29th. Looks like that's
That was the ice storm.
the ice.
Yes. That was the week of the ice storm, where everything was impacted. Service was completely halted in some means or another during that week. So. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to the next item. This is the demand response rolling KPIs. As you can see, once again, this is your January winter weather event here. And as you can see, we're slowly recovering from that event. We're getting back up into close to what we want for our passengers per hour, which is a minimum of 2. We keep bouncing near that line, but not exceeding it. And I think we'll, coming into the summer, we should be able to better efficiently schedule and reach that goal. So denied trips, you always see a correlation between the number of passengers and the number of denied trips, because obviously as there's more requests, there's a greater increase for denied trips. But we had a reduction in our missed trips. The best thing that I have to show you here is on our OTP in Louisville. As you can see, we had issues for a period of time where we were not meeting our anticipated schedule in Louisville. We have now recovered and we are staying above where we need to be for the KPI.
Do you know what was causing that?
A combination of things, operator scheduling and things like that.
Why is Highland Village so terribly low?
In what respect, sir?
Well, I think unless I'm misreading this, isn't that the lowest line you have?
For passenger count,
I'm sorry, OTP, am I in the wrong?
OTP. Well, actually, for the week of February 26th, yes, it was the lowest, but if you look at March 5th, it's in the top 3. So it's
Okay,
bounced back.
so it's okay.
Yeah, it's above where, it never has been an issue other than during the ice storm, has it fallen below where we anticipate.
Because if there's anything we can do by going through our city council to try to make changes that are agreeable to you all, additional kinds of things that could be offered. I'd be very, very interested in trying to help Highland Village be a bigger and better client. I'll put it that way.
Absolutely. We can look at that. I think there's some plans on doing, as Paul has done some outreach in Highland Village, different facilities up there as well. So there's anticipated growth in there. Good. So, any other questions on the mayor's spot?
Or have the local numbers remained up? Past this, like for the last couple of weeks, the last 3 weeks, you know,
For what?
for OTP?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. Any other questions on it?
Can we go back to this, the fixed route and on-time performance and understand what are the reasons why we are struggling to get above 85% on-time performance?
Well, it's a combination of things. If you look at your OTP is really based off of the box that's next to it also as well. It impacts. And if you look at how many missed trips we have and how many delayed starts, the delayed starts is really what it feeds over into your OTP, because if you don't leave on time, you're not gonna be on time. And so if you look, there's a direct correlation between, you had 25% delayed starts, and your OTP is off by 27%. So a big piece of that is just delayed starts.
And so what are the reasons that a person would be delayed getting out of the bus barn?
Well, that's not just out of the bus barn, but that, yes, getting out of the bus barn, either,
Or getting to spot?
yeah, that's leaving the start point, whether that's at the Union or at DDTC. If the operator doesn't depart on time, then that's where you get those. And they have a 5-minute window, so that reflects beyond 5 minutes.
Okay.
So,
I'd like to maybe consider in an upcoming board meeting on a deep dive on on-time performance and help the board understand what drives on-time performance. What are the factors that are causing us problems? If it's discipline issues with drivers, how does the accountability work and all that sort of thing? Because we've begun showing these on-time performance metrics to our DCTA board, who's asked the question, okay, how do we do this? The reason this is important is because we're trying to create a complementary fixed route and on-demand network. And if the fixed route doesn't run on time, then people aren't going to use it. So we have to focus. This is a really important focus. Another really important focus is the fact that the last bar on these graphs says March 5th and not March 22nd or the week prior. Ultimately, our vision is daily ridership, and we have technology now on board to be able to do this. This is something else that Mr. Bell and Mr. Boucher are focusing on and to drive some improvements. I would like to say there's some really good news to be had on the fixed route front. Ridership through the end of February on the connect routes. And if you recall, connect route 6 and connect route 7, the DCT board reinvested in those routes with increased frequency to 20-minute frequencies. Route 7 all the time, route 6 during peak periods. Overall, the connect service is up 81% fiscal year to date. So that meant basically doubling ridership in February and increasing ridership about 1/3 in January. So what we're seeing is our customers respond to increased frequency. They're also responding to perhaps 75-cent fare on GoZone going up to $1.50 in the mileage restriction on the city of Denton service. And so there's momentum for us as we think about our intermediate service plan and causing these networks to be more complementary. No, it is not. It is stayed consistent, about 70,000 rides a week.
When we're talking about on-time performance, we talked about the disciplinary issues, but if we can, I would like to talk about considering incentives for drivers that are meeting their on-time performance KPIs.
Mr. Deshay, we've had conversations with Mr. Bell and Mr. Deshay about recognizing those individuals. With the new technology we're bringing on, it's going to make it so much easier to be able to actually measure an individual performances. And so that's something that he's very strong on, and I think we'll see something by the end of summer. So
I know that it is our positive reinforcement and recognizing good performance and all that sort of stuff. So
absolutely.
yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you.
Speak?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so.
Mike.
Yes, in my previous stops at Greyhound and Dart and at Bi-State, we had 90% plus. Well, at St. Louis, we were 92% on-time performance. And it's really just awareness campaign, making sure operators have a clear understanding of what's early, what's late. And then also listen to the feedback. Sometimes it could be a problem with the schedule, it could be a problem with the time point, making sure that we have the right game plan for them to execute. And then it's regular feedback and execution. So I plan to do the same type of strategy here. We've already started talking about it and saying that, you know, it's a direct correlation between your on-time performance and your customer satisfaction. It affects your safety record as well, because if you're inconsistent with your OTP, you make mistakes. So really just showing the operators the impact, but at the same time, listening to their feedback about how they can make it better themselves. And I see a lot of room for growth in the on-time performance in a relatively short period of time.
Well, and recognizing that we're about to kick off budget, I think it would be wise to consider some financial incentive for those operators. If we're really saying this is one of our priorities, we need to be able to provide that incentive to them.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have presented this, and board members, we have presented this to bus operators in the safety and training on monthly as well. So that campaign, I believe, Steve, that started about 3 months ago, that we started displaying what the on-time performance is and some of the service metrics that we go by. So we're getting them used to looking at that as well and recognizing that.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Slide 3 then, please. This is your service metrics. As you can see, our spare ratios are intact. We're where we need them to be. Our complaints were up this week. I can't speak to why, but we'll find out. I'll get a better understanding of what happened there. On our accidents, we did have a higher level of accidents, and our road calls were up as well. And the road calls are partially due to the shortage of staffing in the maintenance department. So that speaks to how that impacts our daily performance on the maintenance level. So, questions?
Yeah. Can you describe a road call?
A road call, technically, a major is when the vehicle that is in revenue service is no longer able to continue in revenue service. Whether it could be mechanical, it could be a passenger had some sort of issue on the bus. It could be a lot of different things on a road call, but most of the time it is a mechanical related.
I see that giant one that happened on March the 5th, and
Well, and another part of that too, sir, is especially in the spring, we see an increase as well, because you got heat on in the morning, you got air conditioning in the afternoon, and there's issues related with climate control and other components because of the varying temperatures of the day. We can have a 50 degree swing in one day, and that impacts that, so. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Troy. Next item on the agenda is Ms. Sherelle Evans Jones, our treasurer. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, can we
Really quickly go through exhibit number 5, the
Oh, I
PTAS
apologize.
update.
Sorry, go ahead.
And Steve will address that. Just want to make sure that we convey that to the board, what we've been doing with PTAS.
My fault.
That's fine.
Thanks.
So for the, I'm Stephen Beck, the Safety Training and Security Manager for NTMC. Just wanted to let you know that we have established our training program for all the operators and the staff there. We have monthly safety meetings. Working with the DCTA Chief Safety Officer, we've implemented a toolbox talk for the mechanics and for the service attendants. So they're actually getting a different training monthly than what we would present to the entire staff. Also, we are very aware of the PTAS update, and have established continuing safety and education and training. And one of the things of the PTAS is we are required to do de-escalation training. And so far in the last 4 months, we've actually taught de-escalation twice. For we feel it's very important to give our operators and our staff the tools needed to de-escalate situations. In today's world, with what goes on, we do not want our operators getting into a situation to where we make the next big news story over something as trivial as $1.25 for a bus fare. So we are teaching them what they can do to de-escalate the situation and to keep themselves safe. So we have met all the requirements for the PTAPs in that. In addition, with the union safety charter, those objectives have been met, and with our accidents, we've been meeting with the union when we've had accidents appealed. So we are meeting all the requirements for that at this time. Thank you.
Has the joint safety committee met yet?
We have had initial discussions with that, but part of the first quarter, we have not met yet for the first quarter.
In the quarterly requirement?
That's based on the charter, yes. So we'll need to get that scheduled. Get that scheduled, we'll discuss that.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Now, Ms.
Do you really need
Ms. Evans Jones.
For real?
For real this time. So I asked Ms. Evans Jones to just present to the board the vision for our budget process this upcoming year, really because the season is upon us already. And so she will be our tour guide through it on the NTMC side and the DCTA side. And it's important for us to try to integrate the NTMC dialogue and DCTA dialogue on the budget process, because so in order for this body to do what it's intended to do. So Sherelle is going to show us how that's going to work. So take it away, man.
Okay, let's go. Hello. Pleased to be with you this morning. What I wanted to do is just spend a little bit of time going through some of the key things that we anticipate to happen throughout the budget process and reviewing some key things that we see for the budget calendar. In April, a lot of these things, especially, I tried to put them in red font if they were more like internal staff related things versus things that are going to begin to interface with the board. So you can kind of, like, for me, it always helps to understand what's going on to the best I can on either side of the curtain, so you can kind of have some perspective. So from our perspective, the staff will be working through FY24 goals and objectives. And that is anticipated to come in on April 3rd. We have a big day planned with the start of our new senior manager of budget that we are anticipating his arrival on April 10th. So he's going to jump in, eat, to feed in to kind of help us shepherd this budget process. And I look forward to introducing our senior manager of budget in a future meeting. Moving forward into May, what we will be doing as staff members throughout the month of April is taking those budgets and kind of filling out budget documents that then ultimately will get submitted. Those projections are due on May 8th. One of the other things we'll be doing internally is kind of on May 1st, having an internal meeting to answer any questions. What issues are you having in terms of completing that documentation? So there'll be an opportunity for staff to be able to address those questions there. The week of May 15th represents a budget review, internal review, where we get to, I'm not going to use the term, we'll get to discuss internally exactly what those key changes are, what is in the budget, and to make those tweaks before ultimately the budget is packaged up and delivered to the respective boards. So I'm having one of the things that we're proposing, just so you can kind of visually see it, you'll see this date of June 7th, and you'll see this date here of May 24th. The May 24th date is the stated, the planned board meeting for NTMC. What we are proposing is that we move that meeting to the June 7th timeframe. And the reason for that is because, as you can kind of see, we will be basically the 3 business days later, just kind of getting settled in terms of what exactly is in the budget or what items we will be proposing to go forward. And so what we would like is a little bit more time to refine the NTMC budget so that we can bring it to you on June 7th instead of the 24th of May. The goal of the presentation, or what we ideally would like to have, whether it's in this June meeting or some subsequent meetings, we have, a number of opportunities to kind of discuss the NTMC budget and make sure that we have alignment here. But the goal is to have this body and for the components of that budget to then funnel into the overall PCTA budget. And so it's kind of like, you have which one comes first, the chicken and the egg. This one, we would definitely want to make sure that we kind of have alignment and have that budget nailed down as early as we possibly can, so that we can make sure that we are moving forward with numbers that everybody in this body, everyone in this group is aligned with. So I'm gonna move forward to the next slide, please.
Can I ask a question? What's the big red H for?
Holidays.
Oh.
Holidays. So, we want to account for those. Make
No,
sure
I
the work
agree.
days, one of the items, and if you just click the next, yes. So this would be an overall goal. If I'm like thinking of, what would be an excellent way to finish the overall DPPA budget process, it would be, instead of taking this and making it be a September completion, that we do enough work in advance so that we can kind of land the plane, have a sunset of the budget discussion in August. But we'll see where we go with that process and whether we have alignment here with our NTMC board and how the DCTA board has any questions, suggestions for changes, etc. The one thing that I wanted to point out is, as you have included in your packet for this month, it includes the monthly financial statements. And so you can have kind of a picture there. The reason that it feels reasonable, at least from my perspective, that we have some fairly succinct conversations with respect to the NTMC budget is because if you just take a glance at that, it's 5 line items. The majority of the budget for NTMC is the salary and payroll. And so we hear conversations here around the table about how to incentivize behavior that we would like to see. You know, those sorts of things may factor into tweaks and changes that we make to the NTMC budget. But I feel comfortable that we can, as a group, work through the budget in a fairly compact period of time, because we're not working with volumes or lines and lines of financial data as we might be with BCTA. So next slide, please. So essentially, one question that I have is it okay to move that board meeting, as we talked about, to the June 7th timeframe? Any specific issues or initiatives that we wanted to consider in the 2024 budget, and then any other topic that you'd like to discuss here. So with that, to answer any questions, and I'm happy to hear your discussion around these items as well to provide us direction.
Anything from the board?
Question on to the 27th, so we're proposing to move the May 24th to the 7th. And then we would have an additional meeting on the 21st. Is that the proposal? I just kind of understand. What we could consider doing is, if you wanted to make that movement, we may, depending on the topic that you would have to discuss with the board overall, we may not need to have. So we'll do 1 month.
Yeah, I think I would propose we keep it on the calendar, and then as we get closer, we're stepping through a lot of novel things here with, like she said, a new budget manager coming on board on April 10th, and other stuff like that. So what we know is we need to move that 24th meeting out. We can keep the others on there and just see how the process goes, and certainly one meeting too, so.
Thank you.
One other thing that I would add to the conversation around specific issues and initiatives, we talked about things that are going to affect this year's budget cycle, CBA conversation, the mechanic conversation. But largely, we're not expecting, I think we go into this budget process maintaining the current budget for the bus operation in terms of service hours and all that sort of stuff. And the BCTA board may make a decision later on this year about providing other investment into the bus network, given the ridership improvements that we've seen. But that would be a very simple part to encapsulate and then add into the budget itself. So the good news is we should have a lot of work already done. We have to adjust things like fuel prices and part prices and all that sort of thing. But it should be a fairly manageable lift at the outset. Does that make sense?
Are we in agreement with the movement of the meeting? Yeah, I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay, we're moving it.
Keith, do you have any?
Correct.
And I hear the discussion about incentives and, you know, making basically status quo budget, but making some slight tweaks. If there are that we should consider, maybe as you're having discussions with Paul, or I'm open to, if you want to pop me an email or something like that to help me to understand if there's any specific issues that we want to make sure that we're addressing with this year's budget. We are happy to receive those in whatever format works best. Okay. Anything else we want to talk about?
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, item 5 on the agenda, presentation of the NTMC staff spotlight. Cool.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We, as a whole, we would like to thank all of the NTMC employees from management and on their job that they're doing. They've got a lot of stressors out there, and they've been performing the service for us, especially during the ice storm. we had several operators that came in, several staff members that came in every day and assisted and performed the service as needed. And just in general, from minimal staff levels, from management on down, that they've had to work extra and in order to get service out at this point. And you can see from the organizational chart, we're a little low in some areas. So they've been stepping up and assisting and performing the work that is needed in order to keep service out. From our perspective, I know Sean's been out several times to make sure that service is out. Steve has been out as well in order to make sure that services is out. I know that's not ideal by any means. However, we did what we needed to do in order to make sure that service went out and our passengers were taken care of. So would like to, again, thank everybody from maintenance, operations, HR, all the departments for their work that they've done in the past. We appreciate them.
How do we thank them?
We've had several cookouts for employees. I think we completed our third one, and the third one was a part of the bus operator transit employee week. Prior to that, we've had a couple of other cookouts for them, just to thank them for the service that they're performing.
It's nice if you have a way of doing it. I'm glad you're doing it that way, because a lot of times words don't serve as much as something like you're doing. So that's really good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that comment. And we've also in safety and training have delivered. We've done just a little congratulatory. You will talk to that a little bit, Steve.
Also, we have at the last several safety meetings recognized those employees who have given service to DCTA and NTMC. We recognized one operator for having 21 years of service to this organization, several at 10 and 15. We also recognized our newer operators, but we honored them all. They all got personalized certificates. And then we also gave all of our veteran operators, those who served in our U.S. military, a framed certificate thanking them for their service and a lapel pin that Sean can display for you all that was given to them as a token of our appreciation. And then finally, the 4 road supervisors who spent the week away from their families in hotels here during the ice storm, they were given a $100 gift card to Amazon as a way of saying thank you for spending time with their families. So we've been doing a lot of employee recognition, and just at this last safety meeting on Saturday, those who got 100% of their quiz, they were given a gift card from Bert as a way of showing thank you for paying attention and incentivizing them. So I also say there's been a lot of donuts in the office last week. For those of us who are trying to watch our waistline, it's not a nice thing. But we've been working very hard to recognize the employees and make them feel more welcome.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, because if there's anything that helps, everybody works for so much money, but if there's anything that helps the folks who enjoy what it is they're doing, is recognizing that they have something else they come to do. So that's really a good idea.
We've had a lot of positive feedback and comments regarding the cookouts, and they're thankful for that and appreciative that we take the time out to show appreciation to them.
Yeah, I'll also say that we did that whole staff call on Saturday or Sunday before last. Sunday's the only day that there's not drivers on the road largely, so we used that to get them together, the DPC, and we formally introduced our new general manager and just had a conversation on where DCTA is going and what are we doing, and they appreciate that understanding and visibility on the bigger picture and that sort of thing. And so it's certainly a focus area for us. And as we think about goals and objectives for a general manager, that can certainly be accommodated within that. You know, maintaining the strong employee recognition program, improving morale through such things, all that stuff.
Well, I think especially what some of the things these folks have to go through, that's a great idea. But sometimes it's not the most pleasant thing in the world to be doing something.
All right, well, the last item on the agenda is also very, very important, and that's to recognize Hendrickson Transportation Group and the employees of HTG who have served us so well here at NTMC. And so I think Keisha stepped out to get some things, and I'm gonna come up here and John, why don't you come on in? Thank you, Keisha. So it is hard to overstate the degree of transformation that has taken place at DCTA over the course of the last 3 years. Our board of directors set a vision for what value they wanted DCTA to be able to deliver to our stakeholder communities, our taxpaying entities. And through the course of that process, DCTA saw fit appropriately to call for expert help. And so that's how HTG was brought on board to help get the organization's arms around the bus operation, deliver the types of services that we've been talking about today at a high degree of quality. And so it's appropriate as we come to the conclusion of the HTG engagement that we recognize that and that we applaud them and tell them thank you and how much we appreciate the support that they provided to DCTA and NTMC over the last few years. The fact that our bus service the Connect service is up 30% year over year. The fact that our UNT service is on a hockey stick kind of recovery out of COVID-19 is attributed in no small part to their ability to deliver excellent service consistently. And so we want to say thank you for that. So what I'd like to do is call up 3 individuals and then recognize HTG as a whole. So first, presented with great appreciation to Mr. Stephen Beck for your dedicated service and partnership to DCTA. Steve, why don't you come on up? Yes, appropriate. Thank you very much. Fearless secretary / driver / road supervisor / all of the above, Sean Spell. And then finally, what he has lacked in tenure, he's made up for in action, I think, over the course of the time that he's been with us. Maurice joined us. When did you join us? Was it about this time last year?
Yes, February of last year.
Yeah, and has hit the ground running and was a trusted advisor and confidant and willing to provide candid feedback as to where things were and where they needed to go. And so I'm personally appreciative of that. So thank you, Maurice. And then finally, I'm glad to see John here this morning because we would like to be able to recognize formally Hendrickson Transportation Group. And it says for outstanding dedication, commitment, and partnership with DCTA in serving the public transit needs of our customers. March 2023. So John, I'll. I'd like to say a few words.
Sure. Well, we're humbled by this. We appreciate it. When we came in here, it was supposed to be an initial 90-day engagement. And so we were just trying to get things moving forward, but we wish you luck in everything that you do. You know, I'm a proponent of public transportation, and so public transportation plays a vital role in people's daily lives, economic development, and all the other things that go on with someone who, you know, depends on us. And so I encourage you to keep moving forward and keep the community, you know, in your sights and keep their needs focused on how you provide your services. And we appreciate being here and we thank you for the time and we wish you guys great luck and great success.
Thank you very much. Okay. So with that, we'll move to our next item, future agenda items and board member requests. Staff will discuss, and board members will discuss proposed future agenda items for the next meeting, which is currently scheduled on April 18th. So we certainly have one or two with the adoption of a general manager evaluation policy and consideration of general manager goals and objectives. Are there any others that people would like to see on the agenda?
This says the next board meeting date is April 20.
Oh, good point.
Please,
Let's confirm.
if there's anything I need to know is exactly what day it is. So I don't come to 27 other.
Good catch. I've got my calendar is April 20th. It should also, if you would mind checking your calendars too, make sure we got this right.
That's a Thursday.
Okay. Well, thank you for
Thursday,
that.
it's Thursday then, rather than Tuesday.
Thursday, April 20th. If you could also just confirm on your calendar. Okay. All right. From there, we have the opportunity to convene an executive session. There's no items scheduled on this agenda. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, in favor? All right,
Aye.
let's do it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.